we'll get started. Welcome everybody to the joint North East and Yorkshire Humber Fuel Poverty Forum. We've got a joint forum again just because we thought it went quite well last time and people seemed to like the idea. So my name's Diane Bland, I'm Project Development Coordinator, and I'll be helping to facilitate and chair this meeting with my colleagues Nina, Tracy and Mike. We've got a packed agenda today. I'll run through it very quickly. We're very pleased to have Kirsten Horton here from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to talk about what's going on in that department. We've also got Amanda Megson from the Energy Saving Trust. Our own Matt Copeland, Policy Manager for NEA. We are then going to break off and have some group discussions, as I do know you like to have some kind of a chat during the forums. And we'll look at what you have been doing differently in your response to COVID-19. A bit of a knowledge sharing exercise. After that, we have Irina Kosak from the Office of Gas and Electricity Markets. And we're ending with a little bit of technology from Lewis Casely from Solar Capture Solutions. So I hope you'll find it all very interesting. If we were hoping to have around 50 people from local authorities, housing associations, energy suppliers, distributors, and energy advice organisations. If there are any acronyms that people don't understand, please put your hand up and ask, because sometimes we get a bit carried away with shortening various things. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kirsten from Bays. If you could share your screen, please, Kirsten, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll go ahead with that. Thank you very much, Diane. All right, how's that going?
Great.
Yep.
Perfect. I really appreciate the fact that I can actually see a lot of your faces. Sometimes it feels like you're presenting to a bit of a blank screen. So this is really great, and I'm really happy to be here virtually. I've been to some of the in-person fuel poverty forums in previous years, and I'm really grateful we can still have them this year and still go ahead with them. They're so helpful, and I feel like I always meet really interesting people and learn a lot. My name is Kirsten Horton, and I work on the fuel poverty strategy in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So what that means is right now I'm working on updating the 2015 fuel poverty strategy and trying to make sure that people have lower energy bills primarily by making sure that people have more energy efficiency, but also through some additional means of support. So what I'm planning to do today is to run through some of those methods we have of supporting households who do need a bit of help with their energy bills, talk through some of the opportunities there are for those households, and what we think the future of those is going to look like. And then there will be a bit of time as well to ask me any questions that are on your mind. So please do be thinking about those as well. And like Diane said, I can be a bit acronym prone at times, so please as well ask me if there's any acronyms that I use that are a bit unfamiliar. I will do my best to avoid them. So the main focus today is going to be on energy efficiency schemes. So this is one of the best ways and the most long-term and sustainable ways of helping people who are in fuel poverty to have lower energy bills is by installing energy efficiency measures. Like insulation or in some cases new heating systems. And then I'll talk through some of the additional support that's available as well. So to start off with, I think the excitement over the past several months has really been over the Green Homes Grant. There's the voucher side of this grant, which is worth £1.5 billion this year. It's available to households they have access to the voucher to get an installer to install energy efficiency measures or low carbon heating measures. The scheme launched in September. We've had quite a few applications already for vouchers, and we've started to deliver a few of these vouchers as well. A few households have started having the work done, which is really exciting. The scheme is going to continue, and works are going to continue up until the end of March. For lower income households on certain benefits, you can receive up to £10,000, and that can cover 100% of the measure that you're looking at. Other households, which can include landlords, can receive 2/3 of the cost of improvement, up to £5,000. So this can be for insulation, this can be for a low carbon heating system, and then we can have some secondary measures as well, in addition to some of those primary measures of things like double glazing. We also have a local authority delivery side to the Green Homes Grant. So this part is being delivered, in partnership with local authorities. Local authorities have already started bidding for funding. Phase 1A has closed our bids, and we've given out 57 bids worth a total of 76 million to different local authorities across England to start delivering, again, insulation and low carbon heating for people on lower incomes. We now have phase 1B open for applications. So if there's anyone from a local authority here, I would encourage you to apply. There's until December 4th for applications, and those projects can be delivered up until the end of September next year. And then we will have a phase 2 that will be opening up in the new year for applications, but that will be through local energy hubs rather than BEIS managing the kind of application scheme. So we're really excited about this because we really think that local authorities have so much knowledge as to where they can best target some of this money and where they can really help people in need of support. So we're excited about how this is going, and we're looking forward to some of these results. Some of you who have been around the fuel poverty space for a while may be familiar with ECO, also known as the Energy Company Obligation. So this scheme has been around for quite a while. This is energy companies installing primarily energy efficiency measures, things like a loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, solid wall insulation. It's worth 640 million every year. And it's focused on people who are on certain benefits that suggest they might be more low income or vulnerable. This is also across Great Britain, it's not just in England. Since the scheme started in 2013, it's delivered nearly 2.8 million measures in more than 2.1 million households. It's done a great job both in reducing the amount of carbon emissions, but more importantly, I think, also helping a lot of households to have lower fuel bills. Some of you may also be familiar with the new standards that have come in the private rented sector. So in April of this year, we had some new standards come in that said households in England and Wales, homes that are being rented out privately, must have a minimum energy performance certificate of band E or file a valid exemption. We are now consulting on raising those standards even further. So we are looking now and consulting now at raising that standard to band C. That would come into effect for new tenancies from 2025 is what we're consulting on, and for all tenancies by 2028. Again, this is unless there's a valid exemption. So we've proposed a cost cap as well, and various other exemptions. For example, if it's a listed building and you can't do the energy efficiency improvements that you might need to in order to improve the energy efficiency rating. But this has been a really massive difference. I think it's a real game changer. We'll see what the responses are to the consultation, but would really encourage any of you who are interested to respond to that consultation, even just to a couple of the questions. We're really interested in hearing a range of views on what people think about these new potential regulations for landlords. And finally, I'd like to talk a bit about some of the additional support that can be accessible, because although I firmly believe in energy efficiency measures, and I really do believe that energy efficiency measures are the best long-term way of supporting people and making sure that in the long term households have affordable heating bills. In the short term, I know that this year in particular, a lot of households are struggling. So one method of support is the warm home discount. This is done through energy suppliers. Most lower income pensioners will be receiving this automatically if they're receiving the guaranteed income, or sorry, the income credit part of pension credit. For households who are eligible, if they're on an eligible benefit, they can apply to their energy supplier to receive the warm home discount. Energy suppliers have also agreed to support households affected by COVID-19. They agreed this in March, and that's still accurate. But it can be things like extending emergency credit, but it can be a wide variety of other things as well. If someone's shielding and they can't go out to top up their prepayment meter, that can help support that household. So if you are working with a household who has been affected by COVID-19 and is struggling, please do encourage them to contact their energy supplier. We also, my colleagues at the Department for Work and Pensions provide winter fuel payments for pensioners. So this can be a payment of either 200 or 300 pounds at the beginning of the winter for pensioners to make sure that they can heat their houses. And cold weather payments. So this is a payment of 25 pounds per week when the weather's below zero. So we do recognize that this kind of additional support can be really necessary and really vital in the meantime, while we're working to make sure that everyone has a warm home. So that's a very quick overview of the different support that we have available. Real whistle stop tour. I apologize if that was a little too quick. But I would be really happy to follow up and have a bit of a conversation about any of the slides I presented, or any of your questions about how government's responding to fuel poverty generally.
Thank you, Kirsten. That was really helpful. Thank you. I should have said earlier that if any people want to ask questions, there are two options. You can use the chat box, or you can put your hand up if you prefer to speak directly. Are there any questions at all? Can't see any. I have one in terms of the support that the suppliers are extending to vulnerable householders. Is that just, that's not regulated, that's just a voluntary thing, is it, that energy companies can do?
So yes and no, I guess. Yes, there's a voluntary agreement between suppliers and BEIS that they'll provide support to households who are affected by COVID-19. So yes, in that sense, absolutely. However, in addition, from December 15th, Ofgem is bringing in new rules saying that any energy suppliers who are collecting debt repayments need to consider households' ability to pay.
Yeah, because in my experience of giving lots of energy advice, I do quite often find that not all suppliers are actively providing this extra support, or they'll do it for a short while and then stop, when in fact it's needed a bit more long term rather than just once or twice even. But my experience, I don't know whether anyone else has had any experience along those lines.
Yeah, and I do recognize that while it looks good on paper, things don't always work that way in practice. So I shared my email address on the screen, but I'm happy to share it again here as well. And if you are having experiences where actually maybe a particular supplier is not being as helpful as you would expect with some of the vulnerable households you're working with, then do please feel free to get in touch and we can try to follow that up.
I do have a question here from Lynn Hunter. How are BEIS monitoring the uptake of the Green Homes grant?
Yes, so we have a data dashboard actually that ministers specially requested. So ministers and officials are getting regular updates on how many applications there are, as well as how many works have been started.
Okay.
I'll just add to that quickly and say that lots of MPs are very interested on it, and I think you guys are getting written questions on every day about this. So if you're really interested, then you can go to sort of the Parliament website and search for it, and you get pretty much a daily update from it, as far as I can tell.
Okay. A couple more questions. Let me just see. Let me quickly run through them. Given that the LAD 2 timeline has just been brought back from June 22 to December 21, with expectation of majority of delivery being September 21, how realistic is it that BEIS will see sufficient bids to get the funding spent on this phase?
I have to say that I'm not as familiar with the LAD timeline, so I might have to get back to you on that. If you're willing to send me an email, I've put my email address in the chat. I know that we have opened, phase 1A. We heard feedback that some people felt that the timelines for phase 1A were a bit of a struggle, which is why we opened phase 1B with a slightly longer window. Phase 2, I would be interested in your feedback, but I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the specifics of the timelines.
Okay, thanks. Well, Lynn, you want to get in touch with Kirsten about that. Alex Hargreaves, I've heard there is a shortage of air source heat pumps. Will BEIS consider extending the scheme beyond March, as projects will be delayed awaiting for equipment?
So at the moment, the end date is March, as you know, but we are actually keeping everything under review, and we will keep an eye on any changing circumstances and what the implications are of that.
Okay. And another question around the Green Homes grant, looking at there's a shortage of Trustmark registered contractors, so of course there's going to be delays in the delivery of that Green Homes grant as well. So that's something to take into consideration. Yeah,
we'll definitely keep that in consideration. We've definitely seen an increase in Trustmark approved installers, which has been really great to see, but of course we'll keep it under review.
Yeah. So did you say that people have already received vouchers from the Green Homes grant?
Yeah, that we have had a few out there already, yes.
Okay.
I'll just add to that. I think the Prime Minister has indicated this morning that there is an expectation that the scheme will be extended for a year.
Oh, okay. Right.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
I think just one more question as well, from Cliff Duff, which says, don't forget about EcoFlex. I don't think you mentioned that in your presentation, Kirsten.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. So part of the energy company obligation, or ECO, is that energy suppliers, in addition to delivering to the kind of more traditional criteria of people on certain benefits, can also partner with a local authority. So any local authority can put forward a statement of intent of which households they see as being in fuel poverty in their local area, and who they really want to target with this kind of extra measures. They can work with energy suppliers to help them find those households and deliver support to those households. Energy suppliers can deliver up to 25% of their obligation through EcoFlex. So it's been really, really interesting. We've seen some local authorities do some really great work with it. So absolutely agree, it is a really important part of the scheme.
Okay, is that, I think, have we any more questions for Kirsten that I've missed there? Was that the response you're expecting, Cliff, in terms of EcoFlex?
Hi, Diane, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, thanks. Yes, it was, because that's really important for local authorities, because we are receiving a lot of sort of applications. We're seeing quite a spike at the moment in EcoFlex applications from contractors, and obviously with people who potentially have been employed and sort of on furlough with COVID. I think that obviously EcoFlex may be able to assist more people than it has been doing, while obviously they're unemployed or in between jobs or while they're furloughed.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of interest. In general, I know that some energy suppliers and some installers were concerned that people might not want works being done in their home while they're at home, but actually we've seen the opposite. We've seen a lot of people really keen to get installation and to get a warmer home and actually to get works done sometimes while they're at home. They're really keen to be able to, you know, not have to take a day off work and let people in and stuff.
Okay. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, thank you very much, Kirsten. That's great.
So much for having me.
No problem at all. Right, next on our agenda, we have Amanda Megson from the Energy Saving Trust. Are you about ready, Amanda, to share your screen?
I am, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, there we go. Hopefully, is that sharing okay?
That's lovely, thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, for having me. Really appreciate just having a quick 10-15 minutes to give you an update on Redress. If you don't know me, I recognise quite a few faces in there, so that's really nice. My name is Amanda Megson. I've worked in the North East on fuel poverty for a long time. I'm currently working for the Energy Saving Trust on their energy redress scheme. And this is, hopefully, a lot of you have heard of the funding scheme. It is quite an important funding for fuel poverty work. And if not, hopefully this is going to encourage you to find out a bit more and maybe look to make an application. So I'm the development officer on the energy redress scheme, and I cover a lot of the projects in the north and in Scotland. So in a quick sort of roundup, the Energy Saving Trust manage the scheme on behalf of Ofgem, and Ofgem basically are any sort of company that are regulated by Ofgem. If there is any sort of breach of regulations or rules, the companies can put some money into a pot, which is the energy redress scheme, and because of that, we basically don't know how much money is going to be in the pots at any one time. It very much depends on what the energy companies have been doing and what investigations have been concluded. So because it varies, we review the amounts in the pot on a sort of quarterly basis, basically January, sort of April, July and October. And then we open a funding round accordingly, depending on what is in there. In terms of the funding, it is open to registered charities and housing associations that are exempt charities only. So if you are a different type of company out there, or you're a community interest company, we do encourage partnership working. So you can partner with a charity as long as the charity is the lead partner in the project. You know, that's one way that the funding is open to a wider variety of entities that are out there. It's available to organisations throughout England, Scotland or Wales. But they must be registered with Redress in advance, which you can do on the Energy Redress website, which will be at the end. So do make sure that you've registered, and then you will get all of the information about each of the rounds as they come through, and you'll be kept up to date. The priorities around the fund is mainly around supporting energy consumers that are in vulnerable situations. We do have a pot that's specifically around innovation, which is to support people generally, well, energy consumers more generally. But a lot of the work is specifically for energy consumers in vulnerable situations. In terms of what we can fund, it can be capital or revenue funding. It can be up to 100% of the project cost. Match funding always looks great as part of an application, so do bear that in mind. In particular, if you're a housing association, you know, it does look good if you're able to sort of put some match in there. Projects can be any length up to a maximum of 24 months. And we usually set a minimum and maximum grant amount every quarter for different streams. The minimum traditionally so far has been about 20,000 K up to about a million. And quite importantly, we do sort of ask, especially some of the sort of smaller charities, to bear in mind that grants are paid quarterly in arrears, which that's quite tight for smaller charities. So that is something to bear in mind if you're planning a project. And in terms of what we can't fund, that's any activity that sort of benefits an Ofgem regulated company. So unfortunately, that does include eco top-ups, any sort of referrals into supplier obligations. So that does include Priority Services Register and Warm Homes Discount. The funding can cover raising awareness of those. We know those are important tools in tackling fuel poverty, so you can raise awareness, but in terms of the actual sitting down and make the referrals, that should be funded from somewhere else. It also includes things like RHI payments as well. So and it does mean that things that are within the scope of eco, so some of those measures can't be funded through redress, unfortunately. Oh, need to go back. In terms of where we are at the moment, round 9 just closed at the beginning of November. It had 6.5 million, just over 6.5 million pounds in the fund. So we're busy assessing those applications at the moment. The independent grant panel will be meeting in December. So we should be making decisions and announcing the successful projects later on in December. Hopefully that'll be good Christmas present for some projects. Round 10 is likely to open in January 2021, so we'll have a review of what's in the pot at the time, and we will be able to make an announcement about all the details with that. And we'd be looking for projects to start around sort of April time, the sort of new financial year time. It's likely, we often have a small grants fund, so something between 20,000 and 50,000 pounds, a main fund which could be somewhere between 50 and £1 million. And like I say, sometimes we do have an innovation fund in there. All those details would be announced as soon as we'd finalise those. And although I was hoping to be able to make an announcement today, we've got some final decisions to make, but please do keep a lookout on the social media, and if you are registered, you will get an email, because we do have a new fund that's coming and it's pretty imminent, so you should hear something in the next couple of weeks about that. So apologies, I can't say too much about it at the moment. Yeah, just some final details to be ironed out, but do look out for that very shortly. In terms of the fund that we have open at the moment, we started a crisis fund back in May, I think it was, which is mainly around supporting charities to buy fuel vouchers for vulnerable customers who are on prepayment meters and who have been affected by COVID in some way. The fund sort of covers the cost of the fuel vouchers, the admin fee per voucher that the voucher providers charge, as well as an admin fee for distributing the vouchers, which can be up to a maximum of 15% of the voucher costs themselves. So we have round 5 of that fund open at the moment. There's £3.9 million in the pot. Grant size has increased from the previous rounds based on sort of learning we've had from those first few rounds. So minimum grant applications are £50,000, and that can be up to 400,000. The deadline for that is the 30th of November 2020 at 5 PM. So if you're not registered with Redress and you would like to apply to this, make sure you get your registration in as soon as possible. We are getting through them really quickly. And the application for this fund is via a Word application as opposed to through our normal charity dashboard. So do register with us and get those applications in. It was just going to be a quick sort of advice to applicants if you are thinking about applying or you've applied before and maybe haven't been successful. Do bear in mind that we get, well, the vast majority of applications that we get are for energy advice projects. So if you can have a think about it and try and come up with something that is going to make you stand out from a crowd when you're submitting the application. Do be really clear about the benefits and the difference that your project will make. I know a lot of you have been working in this area and working in your particular patch for such a long time. So you will have a lot of data there and a lot of evidence to show what you do works. So make sure you include that within the application and show us why that approach is the right one. Ideally think collaboration rather than competition. So if you can join forces with other charities in the area or other organisations in the area, that's all the better. It's important that we're not duplicating work that's already happening. So yeah, do have a look at that, see what's already out there and happening, and maybe join forces if you can. Feel free to be concise. I think a lot of people worry that they can't maybe use bullet points, but that's perfectly acceptable within the application as long as you can get your point across that way. And do proofread it. Get somebody to have a look through your application before it's submitted, a critical friend, ideally, to just make sure they've had a look through it. And of course, we can't get through a presentation these days without mentioning COVID. So do consider the impact of COVID. I know a lot of projects have been, and charities out there have been so innovative in the way that they've managed to deal with the situation and come up with great solutions to still support people, as there's more people who need support than ever before. So get that across within the applications that you're making to Redress. And yeah, we don't know how long the effects are going to last, so it's best to sort of plan that COVID maybe is going to be part of our lives for a little bit longer. So in terms of sort of just a bit of a summary, do remember, if you haven't registered with Redress, that's the website, and these slides can be shared. So do register to apply. If you have registered a long time ago and don't know how to get back onto the charity dashboard, or the person's left, do let us know, because we can get that updated and amended, not a problem. Do have a look at the guidance and the feedback documents on the website. If you're planning an application, the guidance document is very much written for you as you're writing your application, so you can literally refer to each section as you go through, and it should support you quite well in that. And again, it's really important to research existing local support and services that are already available. We don't want people duplicating what's already happening out there, so have a look. And we've got quite a lot of redress projects within the North East and Yorkshire and Humber, so please do. There's a map on the website and a table of all the projects with links to their websites. So do have a look and see what's happening in this area, and get in touch with them if you can. And do follow us on social media. It's a good place to get the sort of latest news and updates. So our Twitter feed's on there. We also have a LinkedIn page, and we are looking at Facebook at the moment. And just a quick mention that the Energy Saving Trust website has just recently been revamped, and it's very great, really clear, lots more sort of calls to action, a lot more advice, things that people can do. So do have a look at it. It's really good and useful for advisors. And feel free to contact me. I think probably got a little bit of time here to take questions, and you can contact me on my email or my work mobile. You can contact the team. We have a team address that you can contact if there is projects outside of the North East or the North in Scotland that you want to inquire about, and our website's there. So Yeah, more than happy to take a couple of questions now if we've got time, or like I say, get in touch. But thanks so much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. We do have time to take a few questions. There's a couple here in the chat. One I think you've answered about, is there a list of people who have received the finance?
Yes, we've tried to make that more clear recently. Before, I think it was only really in our announcements section, and there was a map that was sort of buried a little bit on the website. So the map is a lot more clear now, so you can click on where they are. But underneath the map now is also a big table of all of the projects that have been funded so far. I think there's about 110 projects from about 99 organisations, something like that.
Okay. So we've also had a question around the problems with vendors at PayPoint and Post Office, where they're unable to process the vouchers. Has that been flagged up as an issue with you?
Yes, I must admit, I mean, even I used to run a fuel voucher scheme before I started with Energy Saving Trust, and I had the very same problem. So I'm very sympathetic with this and tried to raise it as much as I could when I started here. We have flagged this up. We've flagged this up importantly with the fuel voucher providers, the main ones that we're that are working on these schemes. So Ariga, Caris, Fuel Bank Foundation. We're trying to get them to speak to PayPoint and Post Office to make sure that they can resolve this problem. If you are having problems, I know there's usually a telephone number that you're given so that you can ring through to Post Office and PayPoint to try and get that issue resolved. If you're continuing to have problems, I mean, speak to your fuel voucher provider in the first instance. But if you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere, do let us know, because we will try and flag this up as much as possible.
Okay. So can I just confirm the map that you mentioned, does that include the crisis, people who've got crisis fund?
It doesn't. We decided not to put them on the map, partly because we didn't want them to be inundated when it's a limited pot of funding, and also the risk of sort of fraud if we give that information out. If you're registered with Redress, then we are able to send out a list of fuel voucher providers, and therefore you can then contact the relevant project who has some funding and maybe set up a referral or system if that's in place. Round 5, importantly, one of the things that we're asking as part of the application this time is that people will, or the successful projects will have to take referrals from other organisations. So that's one of the key changes we made to round 5.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, anybody else got any questions before we move on? Okay, thank you, Amanda, that's really useful.
Not a problem, but like I say, any other questions that come up afterwards, please just drop us an email.
Yeah, and we look forward to your new announcement.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now it's time for Matt, our policy manager at NEA, to give us a bit more of an update in terms of what's going on in terms of fuel poverty policy. So over to you, Matt.
Can you see my screen, Dan?
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. So I'm Matt Copeland, Policy Manager at NEA. So I think a lot of you know me already because I've been at previous forums, but nice to see lots of names and faces that I recognise. So we've got a good situation today where we've heard already from Kirsten on a number of things, and we're going to hear some more about the self-disconnection stuff as well a bit later. So when it comes to those things, I'm not going to go into depth about the policy. I'm going to go into depth about NEA's views on the policy. There's a couple of other things that I would like to more fully explain though. So the things I'm going to talk about are the private rented sector minimum energy efficiency standards that Kirsten touched on earlier, an update on the NEA report, the UK Fuel Poverty Monitor, which we released, I want to say in September, but I don't think I've spoken to a lot of you since then. So I'll give an update on what that said and what it recommended. I'll give an update on the warm home discount. So Bayes consulting on the next scheme year for that. So that will be 2021-22. NEA's views on the comprehensive spending review, which is it's a 1-year spending review that will be announced later this year, giving money out for government projects. I'll touch on the new supply license conditions for prepayment meters and self-disconnection and give a brief view from ourselves. And we've also been doing, continuing our work on water poverty, and we've recently released a debt paper, which I'll just touch on at the end. If people do have questions, if you put them in the chat, that'll be really useful, and I'll keep an eye on it. I'll try and answer them as I go along, if I can continue to see it. Okay, so firstly, minimum energy efficiency standards. So Bayes, as I said, are consulting on this, and the consultation proposes to raise the current standard from EPC-E, which landlords currently have to meet by spending £3,500, to EPC-C by 2028, where landlords would have to spend up to £10,000 to reach that new standard. Sorry, and this is independent of the current minimum standards as well. So if a landlord's already spent £3,500 to get to E, they would have to spend a further £10,000 to get to C. It's going to be a phased approach. So for new tenancies, it would be 2025 to reach that target. And for existing tenancies, 2028. So that would mean that all tenancies would have to reach EPC-C by 28. And that £10,000 is a central case that the government is proposing. They also look at what would happen if there was a £5,000 limit and a £15,000 limit. But they come down on £10,000 because if there's a £5,000 limit on landlords, significantly fewer homes get upgraded by their modelling. If they raise it to £15,000, relatively few extra households get upgraded. So £10,000 seems like a reasonable placement to land. For NEA's point of view, this to us has to be fair for both householders and landlords. So for householders, it does seem pretty fair with a lot of homes getting upgraded to EPC-C, but £10,000 is a lot of money for a landlord to spend on their home. And we think that in order to ensure that the landlords comply with this, the stick of that £10,000 requirement needs to be complemented by some sort of carrot to supplement that for them. So we're going to advocate for a couple of things. Firstly, a tax exemption for landlords purchasing energy efficiency measures. So you may remember previously we had the landlord energy saving allowance, or LESA or LISA. We think that would be worth bringing that back. And we also think that it's worth thinking about whether landlords should be able to access grant schemes like the Green Homes Grant and its successors. But if they could access those grants, not being able to increase rents for 3 years afterwards to ensure that it's a fair deal for their tenants. Also, to ensure that compliance is reasonable throughout the private sector, we think there needs to be better data infrastructure to help enforcement. There's a landlord database that currently runs in Wales that we think is a good idea, sort of thing that has been that the Committee on Fuel Poverty has advocated for as a good way of helping enforcement. And I think something similar is being trialled by Bayes with local authorities in their MEES enforcement pilot as well, which we're hoping to see some information on, hopefully in the near future. But the overall NEA view of these proposals are that pretty good. £10,000 is really ambitious. 2028 is pretty ambitious as well. So overall, as a charity that supports fuel poor households, we're relatively confident this will support lots of fuel poor households. So we're pretty supportive of this. Secondly, I'll just talk about the fuel poverty monitor for a bit. So this is our sort of annual bit of research where we look at essentially the state of the energy market and the policy landscape, and determine what the outlook is for fuel poor households and what's happening to support them, what more needs to be done. As Amanda quite rightly pointed out, you can't really do anything at the moment without thinking about COVID. So in this year's report, we focused on the impact that the pandemic and the measures to combat it, such as the lockdowns, has had on fuel poor households. We did this by building on our own insight that our project development coordinators have sort of seen on the ground, as well as talking to, I'm sure, many of you, and a call for evidence that we did in order to collect information from frontline advisors as to what they were seeing affecting fuel poor households and the sort of outcomes. And we found 5 main impacts that households have been facing during the pandemic. Firstly, an increase in energy use due to spending more time at home. So this will become more acute over winter as we hit the heating season, as sort of demand increases anyway. I'm sure people work from home will already be sort of feeling that themselves. It's not limited to fuel poor households, but felt most acutely by them. Secondly, a reduction in income, as many jobs have been either lost or placed on furlough. Again, seems to be becoming more acute as we move into further lockdowns, and as we move away from the furlough scheme eventually next year, it will become even more of a problem. We've seen that those two first things combined mean increased affordability issues for households in the energy sector. So their bills are going up, they have less money to pay those bills, and that means increased levels of debt and more energy rationing. We also found that advisors thought that there was likely to be increased levels of staff disconnections this winter, which is really a real worry, but good timing for Ofgem's new license conditions that are going to come in later in December. We also saw reductions in infrastructure changes, so smart meter program and eco saw significant slowdowns during that first lockdown period, meaning that fewer households have received those measures, and both have been important for people to have during lockdown. Smart meter specifically for prepayment households who wouldn't have to leave their home to top up, for example, if they had a smart meter. And eco installs really important this winter, so big challenges with those programs. And lastly, although suppliers were offering a reasonable amount of support to their customers, especially those in vulnerable situations, some had quite difficult times accessing that support. And this was especially true where households were digitally excluded because a lot of the support went online, or spoke English as an additional language, as we saw a lot of the support, as it was sort of frantically made available, was put online in English, but not made accessible to others with additional needs. So yeah, important to get that right. So as a result of these challenges, we've made 5 recommendations, or five themes of recommendations even. Firstly, better identifying need, so trying to identify those households who need support a little bit better, and we think there is a bigger role for data sharing in that. So we mean that in a number of different ways. So data sharing between different organisations, so working together on the ground, but also between government and organisations supporting households. So at the time of the first lockdown, we did put a lot of effort into trying to get access to the shielding data for energy suppliers so that they could provide targeted support to those households who needed it most. We think that there's other government data that could be shared to help suppliers and others identify their customers who most need support. As I said earlier, there was a difficulty for some households being aware of the support that was available to them. So we think that suppliers and others should do more to raise awareness and communicate support. And this is these are recommendations essentially to do with making stuff available in ways that aren't just through the internet, making stuff available in different languages and different formats, and generally just shouting a bit louder about what is available. And the third theme is about supporting prepayment households, and I'm pleased to say that our main recommendation there was around the self-disconnection proposals, and often we've followed through with that. Hear a bit more about that later. Fourth was about addressing utility debt, so growing debt in the sector means over the summer is a real worry going into winter, because that's not usually when debt is accumulated. So we recommend several different things here, including better identification of those who are in debt by suppliers. So we think that a flag for the PSR, the Priority Services Register, should be created to identify financially vulnerable households. We also believe that the government should do more to step into to help those in debt, providing direct financial support to those households. And lastly, addressing a hiatus in policy making. So we saw the government defer a lot of decisions over the summer as to lots of different things. So, for example, the fuel poverty strategy, its release has been delayed. Extensions of the warm home discount have been delayed. And although that government is clearly getting on with this now, it's clear that things need to be accelerated. We're pleased that this seems to be happening, but it needs to continue to happen. So that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of this year's fuel poverty monitor. I'm sure we can provide the link after this session to the document. It's got quite a neat little exec summary, so it's a quite easy read, I think, if you want to see the full set of recommendations. Next thing is warm home discount. So BEIS have consulted on the future of the warm home discount, proposing a single-year extension to the scheme. I think earlier in the year we were hoping that they were going to give a longer extension of the scheme that would have more sweeping changes for who would receive the discount itself, with NEA campaigning for more households to receive the £140 payment automatically, and actually everyone who qualified for it to receive it automatically. However, BEIS, because of the pandemic, saw delays in the release of the consultation. They've decided to start with a one-year extension, and then they'll consult later on broader reforms to the scheme and a longer term extension after that. Within the consultation, they propose a few things, but mainly it's a continuation of the scheme as it is. The main changes were to do with industry initiatives and well, basically industry initiatives, that side of the scheme, trying to adjust that part of the scheme to make it easier to clear the debt issues that I've talked about a minute ago, by providing more debt relief than previously we thought was going to happen in this scheme year, and trying to increase the level of fuel vouchers that could be funded through the warm home discount. So our three main recommendations from this consultation was for BEIS to prioritise ensuring that the required legislation to back this up is expedited. We've seen previously with when Eco 3 was consulted on quite late, we saw the legislation for that go through Parliament quite late, and that meant a huge slowdown in delivery of the scheme. We don't want to see that again. It's really important that for the next iteration of warm home discount that runs April 21 to March 22, there's no delay in delivery. Secondly, we think that the future broader changes to the scheme that I've just talked about should be accelerated. We've been waiting for them for years and years, and those really need to happen sooner rather than later now. And thirdly, those proposed changes to industry initiatives should carefully consider the trade-offs. So we appreciate that there is a need to help those households who are in severe debt in the energy market, but I think there needs to be really careful consideration about what that means. So industry initiatives, that portion of the scheme is limited, and if you are increasing the amount of money that can be used there to to pay off debt, consumer debt, essentially, you're reducing the amount of money available for other things like energy advice, debt advice, benefits advice, which are often more valuable than fuel vouchers and rebates. And we don't think that they should be traded for those sort of direct monetary things. Energy advice, debt advice, and benefits advice are often longer lasting. They're often more sort of bigger initial value for households, so we question whether it's the right thing. Next, onto I've called it a comprehensive spending review here, but it's really just a spending review now. So the Chancellor's announced that later, I think it's actually next week, we're going to have a spending review, 1 year spending review that will look at how much money each government department gets for the year going from April to March. And NEA has published our priorities for this, and I'm sure many of you on the call have seen this already, and some of you kindly submitted your own evidence into the Treasury that sort of backs this up, which I'm very thankful for. But we asked for 5 things in our submission to the Treasury. Firstly, to provide urgent clarity on the future of the walking discount, and fair enough, we've seen clarity on that first year, but not the subsequent years leading up to 2026. Secondly, we've asked for full implementation of the Conservative Manifesto commitment to introduce a new social housing decarbonisation fund and home upgrade grant scheme for fuel-poor homes. This is something that's still in play, we think, and especially looking at the Prime Minister's announcement yesterday that has a focus on energy efficiency, then we think that is something that Treasury could commit to. Thirdly, extending ECO from April 22 to March 26 is something that again the Prime Minister has previously given an indication of, so that we're hopeful of that. Fourth, ensuring that the Shared Prosperity Fund, it's just property fund, it should say prosperity, which is a fund that's meant to replace the structural funding that we used to be able to access from the EU, but will no longer be able to because of Brexit. So we want to ensure that that fund, when it becomes available, can be used for energy efficiency in different regions of the UK through local authorities, but also devolved governments as well. So really hoping that can include energy efficiency measures. And fifth, to extend and strengthen the increase of universal credit. So I think you may have seen as a campaign, an ongoing campaign from ourselves and others to maintain that £20 a week uplift that the Chancellor announced earlier this year, past its current end date of April next year. So we're pretty hopeful that will go through. It's been reported in the Times that the Chancellor does plan to do that, so fingers crossed on that one. As I say at the bottom, although we put this together when it was going to be a longer term spending review, we think that even with the shorter term nature of this, we can get commitments for many of these things. I'm not going to go through this slide on the new rules for suppliers regarding prepayment meters and debt. But what I will say is that NEA is really pleased that the new rules are coming in now. They'll come in December 15th before the majority of winter happens, particularly the integration of the ability to pay principles, which will, as I understand it, be there to help all customers that are in debt, not just prepayment customers, but I may be corrected later. That's really important to ensure that people aren't having to pay more than they actually can. And we think that will have a tangible impact on the relationship that people have with their utility debt, and with something that we're asking for other utility regulators to put into license conditions and things like water and other utilities as well. So really important, but I'll let Ofgem talk about that a bit later. And last but definitely not least, I'll give a quick update on our water poverty work. So my colleague Jess Cook leads on this. She's previously done a paper on social tariffs, and her latest paper is about the landscape of personal debt in the UK. And this report on the right with this lovely front cover to it, which I'm quite jealous of. But this looked at debt across energy, across water and council tax, how debt is treated across those three things, the level of debt, how households perceive those debts, and then has recommendations for what could and should be done to address the growing debt problem. So there are 5 things that are recommended there. So firstly, the government to bring forward breathing space legislation and extend the respite period offered. So breathing space legislation essentially is legislation that's due to come in, I think, early next year, but it might be a bit later than that, that will give people in debt a bit more time to sort of get things sorted out before they have to start repaying debt. So we think that should be brought in earlier, and that time that they're offered to sort stuff out should be extended in that respite period. Secondly, the government to make contributions for payment matching schemes. So as I said, I was talking about the monitor earlier, that's something that we've recommended in energy, so we're also recommending that in water as well. As I've just said, those ability to pay principles and debt collection principles that Ofgem are looking at or are about to implement should be implemented across all utilities. Number 4 there, maximising data sharing should be explored, including building on Priority Services Register and using the Digital Economy Act to share data from governments to private companies to ensure, where that's appropriate, to ensure the support is offered to customers moving into financial difficulty at the earliest opportunity. For example, we know that people tend to fall into water arrears first, often anyway, because they know that they won't get cut off from water, whereas energy is a priority debt, as is council tax, and they're treated differently. So if we can catch people who are falling into debt in their water bills early, we might be able to help them with their energy bills and council tax a bit earlier before they fall into real bad debt. So trying to catch people before they've completely fallen using clever data techniques. And 5th, we think there should be a single definition of something called severe indebtedness to ensure that customers are treated fairly. And we're going to be working with utilities to try and define that, essentially, those who are most in debt. And then coming up, so there's a load of things coming up, to be honest. So that this morning we've had our 10-point plan from the Prime Minister, which has loads of different things in it. I've put the link in the chat, so I'd click on that and have a look if I was you. But that's really interesting and includes some detail on energy efficiency. So it says an extra $1 billion next year for energy efficiency of public buildings and homes, as well as extending the Green Homes Grant. And apart from that, we've got an energy white paper expected before the end of the month. We have a decarbonising heat and building strategy from BEIS, which will be published next year. We have a new fuel poverty strategy, which I'm hoping we publish this year. A national infrastructure strategy, which will include infrastructure priorities for reaching net zero, including, we hope, energy efficiency, which we'll get next year. Ofgem are working on their final determinations for energy networks, and for gas networks, that includes money for addressing vulnerability, and we'll see those final determinations in December. And I think either later this year or early next year, we're about to see the interim Treasury report on a net zero review, which is assessing how we pay for reaching net zero. So, who pays, basically? At the moment, a lot of policies are paid for through energy bills, which is really regressive. Poorer people tend to pay more. And I think Treasury are aware of that and want to look at how they can adjust things so that more stuff is paid out of general taxation. And that is all I've got. There are some questions. Or at least one question.
The one from Cliff.
So, when will the government provide an update on their interim target band E? So, probably not by 2022, which sounds weird, but I think the reason for that is that we don't get the statistics for energy efficiency in buildings until 2 years after the fact. So next year, in 2021, we'll get the statistics for 2019, and in 2022, we'll get the update for 2020. So I imagine the government will provide an update on how well they've done towards meeting that in 2 years. And then Pete, so I'll read exactly what number 10 have said this morning. So not to be wrong. It's quite limited, unfortunately. So it says, for homes and public buildings, £1 billion will be spent next year for making new and existing homes and public buildings more efficient, extending the Green Homes Grant voucher scheme by a year, and making public sector buildings greener, and cutting bills for hospitals and school. So that's all we've got, basically. But it seems like the Green Homes Grant will be extended by a year as it is, and there'll be an additional £1 billion, but not sure exactly what that looks like at the moment. We're awaiting further details that we think we're going to get later today. So any more questions?
No. Got one here. The article refers to voucher schemes only, not lads.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Matt. That's really helpful. Really good insight into what NEA is thinking as a result of its consulting with our members. I thought now it might be useful for us to have a little bit of a discussion, so that you're not being talked at. You can actually discuss issues that are current today. You've all been put into various groups. It would be grateful if someone could possibly just take a few notes of anything that's particularly interesting that comes out of these workshops. And really what we want to just discuss is what you've done differently in response to the COVID-19 impact on vulnerable householders. So as I said earlier, it's a bit of a knowledge sharing opportunity. So if we can all go into groups, Nina, that'd be great.
Okay.
I think we're about all back, are we?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for taking part in those discussions. I hope they were useful. If you would like to if there's someone who would like to feedback for their group, that would be great. I'll kick off with mine, which was group 5. So we had some interesting things going on in terms of influenced by COVID-19. Cliff in Durham has been working with GPs there. GPs themselves are very keen for support in terms of helping vulnerable customers, particularly in this instance, those with COPD and asthma. GPs have been mailing out to vulnerable householders, providing information that the questionnaire that Cliff produced. Cliff then is actually posting letters out, because that seems to be the way that people respond. So that was very useful. And we've heard from Karen Horrocks at Durham Public Health. They're piggybacking on anything that can actually link with COVID, cold homes. They're producing a booklet which they hope will go out to at least all those people at the shielding, if not the whole population of Doncaster. Lots of other things going on. So, you know, useful, because we've all been trying to access GPs, many of us for a long time, if we haven't got those help links. So that was quite useful. Thank you to everyone. Group 1, does anyone want to feedback very quickly on what happened in group 1?
I took some notes, so I'm happy to.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
So I think we talked about some of the same things that your group talked about, Diane. But some of the things that came up that I think was useful was Shelley took us through a couple of things that we've been doing at NEA that she's found particularly useful. So firstly, doing 3-way calling on mobiles to get authority to act with suppliers and the like, as being sort of a lifesaver with helping clients. And also our advice pro system has been really good. what I've heard from everyone else as well is that that's been a bit of a lifesaver too, and is been excellent during the pandemic for NEA. Also heard about sort of digital exclusion, reaching those households who can't be reached on the internet. That's where the support is, and heard from citizen advice that using banners, leaflets, linking up with people in the community, and again GPs to try and reach people in sort of more old school ways. And we had a brief conversation around how it's maybe hasn't affected advice as much, because we've found ways to deliver advice to people still. But measures have often been quite difficult because of the conditions creating the pandemic. But with some reassurance from Eon that it can be done, basically. So lots to learn from, and some reassurance at the end that it can be done.
Yeah, great. Group 2, is there a spokesperson for Group 2 would like to contribute? Not compulsory. Nope. Okay, Group 3. Anyone like to contribute?
I've made some notes if you want me to feedback. Group 3.
Yeah, great, thanks.
We talk more about kind of the impact that it's had kind of on projects internally. A lot about kind of how we've had to kind of quickly develop in terms of getting up to speed with technology and how we adapt, and obviously getting people within the project up to speed with that. That generally we're feeling time poor, and simple tasks have become, you know, not so quick and not so simple, so that's having a huge impact in terms of capacity. That there's a lot of people seem to have had kind of new staff on board, and we had kind of commented that the NEA training facilities that have been moved to online have been excellent and really helpful with that.
Yeah.
But that generally, you know, kind of managing staff and managing projects has become really quite challenging and stressful at times, you know, in terms of trying to keep, you know, to deliver that training to new members of staff and get those people up to speed remotely, given the, you know, the restrictions, and also kind of keeping staff morale up as well, and making people feel kind of included within, you know, if it's a new team for them, and you know, just keeping up that interactions in that way. We then kind of went into having a bit of discussion about what different people said they had available in their particular areas, in terms of, you know, funding and sharing information more so.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was something that you've looked at a lot from, you know, the frontline worker side of things, and it was mentioned in our group by Felicity that communications between themselves within their company have been really quite enhanced by the situation in terms of all the teams and the Zoom meetings that they've had. Thank you. And very briefly, Group 4, was there any feedback from Group 4 at all, please?
Yeah, I can say some. I mean, but on the positive note, people were just saying that it has helped them sort of really streamline their processes, and that whereas before they were mainly home visit based, that, you know, they've realized that some of those didn't maybe need to be home visits, so actually they're being able to help more people than they were previously. Also, they were saying just getting more smarter and proactive with sort of comms, especially around social media, because it's a great, quick and easy and cost-effective way to get messages out to people. But still those concerns that, you know, for the people who are digitally excluded, and the worry around trying to make sure you're supporting them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for everyone for taking part. I hope that was useful. And I'd like to rapidly move on, as time is moving on, please, to Arena. If you're ready to talk to us about Ofgem's recent decision, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Oh, Mike, yeah, I see that you're sharing the screen then. Okay. Great. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me here today. I really enjoy the group discussion as well.
Yeah.
I'm just going to talk about the new protections that I think both Kirsten and Matt already touched upon briefly. So these are new protections for prepaid meter customers and customers who are struggling to pay their bills. So those customers who are in debt. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to cover just some of the consumer detriment we are looking to address very briefly. You probably all are aware of this because you're seeing this in some of your day-to-day work, but it's something I wanted to touch on. Then moving on, I'll just focus on the rules we're introducing and some of the outcomes we want to see as well, finally, and how we'll be going about monitoring the outcomes as well. So just quickly on the consumer detriment we are looking to address. So next slide, thank you. We know that through our research back in 2019, 1 in 7 prepaid meter customers were self-disconnecting. We know from Citizen Advice, more recent research, that this could be much higher. And similarly, data from energy suppliers, we've seen more consumers self-disconnecting. So obviously, this is an issue that is affecting a lot of people, and often it has significant negative impacts on those customers, both in terms of physical impacts, but also emotional impacts. So we've gathered a lot of evidence around the consumer detriment. And we've also noted that there was a gap in some of the consumer protections. So I think, Diane, you mentioned earlier on that some of the things like emergency credit were on a voluntary basis previously. So what we're doing now is to introduce these as a mandatory for suppliers to offer them. So I'll talk a bit more about that. But that was the gap that we were seeing in the market, and also a gap in terms of consistency of support around those customers who are in debt, who may then self-disconnect if they're on a prepayment meter, but also go into further debt if they are on a credit meter. And with COVID-19, of course, we've seen more impacts and negative impacts on consumers. So self-isolation, where prepaid meter customers couldn't go and top up their meters because they had to stay at home if they were on a traditional prepaid meter, but also some of the financial impacts that we're seeing and we'll probably continue to see over the next few months. So that has just shown that we need to address this issue. So in terms of the decision, so just moving on to the next slide, please. So we published our decision. This is basically our final document setting out the new rules that will come into effect. And this follows extensive stakeholder engagement with consumer groups, with the NEA, Citizen Advice, and many others, where we've really gathered that information about the consumer detriment, but also try to understand a bit more what rules would really have an impact here and whether new requirements are needed. So what we're doing is introduce new requirements to protect both prepaid meter customers who are self-disconnecting and self-rationing to some extent, and those who are struggling to pay their bills, so who are in debt. And that covers both credit meter customers and prepaid meter customers. And the new rules, like we've said already, will come into effect by the 15th of December this year. So that was something that we really needed and wanted to do this winter, because we know how affected people will be in the winter, especially if they're on a prepayment meter. So just I'm now going to go into each of the rules. So the first requirement that we are introducing is to require suppliers to identify all prepaid meter customers who are self-disconnecting and offer appropriate support in line with their existing obligation, but also some of the new obligations, which I'll talk about in a second. So we think this identification rule is really important. So this is not something that suppliers were doing previously as part of their requirements. Some of them we know were doing this, but we think it's really important to really understand who is self-disconnecting, and then even further why they may be self-disconnecting, because we know not all customers will be affected if they are self-disconnecting. Some may just forget to top up, or because they're going on holiday. But that's not something we're looking at. We are actually looking at those who are self-disconnecting because they are struggling to top up their meter. So we want to suppliers to really improve that monitoring of customers, and they will be able to do this much better if those customers are on a smart prepayment meter. But there are ways they can do this on traditional prepayment meters as well. So we've set out some examples of how they can do that as well, and a lot of the documents we've published around these obligations. Then next, moving on, this will be interesting from your perspective as well. So the next protections we're introducing is requiring suppliers to offer emergency and friendly hours credit to all PPM customers. So a lot of these are already built in on the meter, on the prepayment meter. So it's just making this mandatory. We know that suppliers were already offering this, majority of them. But it's also about making sure that they do provide information to customers around the use of these credit functions. So for example, we know that they may be built in on the meter, but customers don't know how to access this, how to press the button to access that credit, and they might not know that they have to repay it when they next top up, or how that debt can be repaid. So what we're doing is we're also imposing an information provision requirement on suppliers to do this. So we think this is quite an important step because it's not something that they had before. And if a customer, we've also placed a requirement in there, if a customer can't repay that emergency or friendly hours credit because they are struggling to pay. So if the supplier becomes aware that they have financial difficulties to repay that, they could arrange a repayment plan based on their ability to pay. So that's another part of the requirements. And just finally on this, we're also introducing a requirement on suppliers to offer additional support credit to those prepayment meter customers who are in vulnerable circumstances. So this is what you probably refer to as discretionary credit. We just moved away from calling it discretionary, given we're introducing it as a rule. So it's called additional support credit. It's that extra credit that can be offered to customers who are in vulnerable circumstances. And suppliers will have to consider if that's in the best interest, because we know these are very short-term options for those customers. So if that customer is already in a lot of debt, adding to that debt may not be the most sustainable solution. So we set out that they should refer customers to debt advice or provide other additional support beyond this if that's not in their best interest to actually access the additional credit. And finally, I'm just conscious of time. Yeah, I think we're doing okay.
Don't worry too much.
Great. And finally, so this is these are the credit functions. And just finally, I want to talk about the other set of rules we're introducing. And these are the ability to pay principles. So Matt mentioned earlier whether they cover both credit and prepayment meter customers. They do. So the ability to pay principles sit as part of what's already an obligation on suppliers to consider customers' ability to pay when they set repayment arrangements and repayment plans. There's already an obligation on suppliers to consider that ability to pay. What the principles do is go a bit further, looking at some of the actions we expect suppliers to take. So things like making sure they have their staff trained around understanding a customer's ability to pay. then setting the repayment plan based on an individual's ability to pay, and explaining that and making sure the customer understands the repayment plan, and finally monitoring the arrangements once they've been set up. So, for example, there's a specific principle around if a customer is failed to repay that arrangement, that should trigger engagement from the supplier to actually try and understand why that is the case. Does the customer need do they need to reassess their ability to pay, for example? Is that customer in further financial difficulty? And these ability to pay principles, like I said, should really focus on some of the more sustainable ways of helping these customers to really make sure that they are on affordable repayment plans. And like I said, they do cover both prepayment and credit meter customers.
Oh. Yeah.
So just finally on the outcomes we want to see and some things we will be looking out for over the next few years. So we want to see, that's the one, a reduction in the number of customers who are self-disconnecting. We'll be monitoring this very closely through the data we get from energy suppliers, but also through the information we get from consumer groups. I know particularly Citizen Advice have been doing a lot of research into this in the past through survey data. We also want to see more customers on affordable repayment plans. Again, we can monitor some of this through our data that we collect from energy suppliers. And more generally, want to see a reduction in some of those impacts that customers who are self-disconnecting and self-rationing are facing. And again, we should be seeing that through the data and information we gather from consumer groups and from suppliers themselves as well. So yeah, I was just going to move very quickly, talk about next steps. I've already mentioned most of this, so that's just my final slide here. Okay. The new obligations will take effect from 15th of December. We'll be closely monitor consumer outcomes, like I've said. This is particularly in light of COVID, of course. And we've said to both, we've said this to suppliers as well as to everyone else here. We do encourage knowledge sharing where this is possible around how these consumers can be helped, but also we're actually encouraging energy suppliers to really get together and share best practice and how they identify customers who are self-disconnecting, for example, because we know that is something they always look for more information. And again, I think information sharing like today is always helpful. So I know you said you had some energy suppliers on the call as well, so that's, I think it's really good to see that kind of collaboration. And yeah, and I think that's it for me. I don't know if there are any time for questions. I can see some things popping in the chat, but I didn't get a chance to look at those. But yeah, happy to take a couple of questions if there's time, or if not, over email as well. I'll pop my email into the chat box.
Thank you, Irina. Yes, sorry, we are running out of time a little bit, and we've got Lewis to speak next. There were a couple of questions around, you know, suppliers want the debt paid in 12 months, which is quite often too short a time for vulnerable householders, and a question on encouraging suppliers to allow those on prepayment meters to access agile tariffs. But again, if I can pass those to you and we can answer those.
I'll do that.
Afterwards. That'd be great. Thank you very much, Irina. That was really useful. So without further ado, now we're moving away from policy to a bit of technology, which I think is quite important in terms of net zero and decarbonising the energy market. So I'll hand over to you, Lewis. That'd be great. Thank you.
Hi there. Yes. Yes, I'm Lewis Casey. I'm the commercial manager at Solar Capture Technologies. There's been some really interesting information so far, and it's nice to hear sort of what's going on and what we can do sort of to help in our local area. Eradicating sort of fuel poverty is always going to be a key issue, which has been made more difficult with the current situation. For us, we want to sort of take this opportunity to build in the products that not only help fewer poor families, but reduce carbon dioxide emissions significantly. Not just immediately, but in years to come. A major misunderstanding with solar is that it only works in very sunny parts of the world. In reality, solar is readily available. It's easy to predict when the sun's going to rise and set for the next sort of million years, which is different to sort of other technologies, which is slightly more difficult to predict. However, I think a mix of renewables is exactly what we need to sort of reduce the sort of global CO2 emissions. If you could just move on to the next slide, please. So just to give you a quick sort of brief introduction, I'm conscious of time with everyone's got to get off for meetings afterwards, but brief introduction to Solar Capture Technologies. We originated within the science of photovoltaics as BP Solar's research and development team before becoming the National Renewable Energy Centre. The team was made up of doctors of physics, chemists with a keen interest in sort of innovation and really driving innovation. So through the time of being BP Solar and National Renewable Energy Centre, we held multiple world records in solar cell efficiency. So we're really driving the trend and improving efficiency on solar cells. That's then sort of been taken over by the Asian market, which is where the majority of the modules are produced. So yeah, we've done many research projects around the world with universities and research institutes. So we've always been at the forefront of this technology. So now we're a commercial manufacturing company, Solar Capture Technologies, and we design bespoke solar modules to bespoke solar solutions to generally to OEM customers at our facility in Blythe. We actually had the local MP who came down a couple of weeks ago and said we're sort of one of the best kept secrets in Blythe, which is quite nice, because I think the problem is we're sort of very well known at an academic level, but commercially not so much yet because of sort of our past. So we work with organizations to develop practical solutions and make a real difference to their products. So the products that you might recognize, we sort of manufacture solar modules for all of the emergency roadside telephones around the UK. The two main organizations that supply parking machines, we supply the solar for them. Sono Motors approached us a few years ago. Sono Motors is a German car manufacturer, which is, I mean, electric vehicles is quite a topical conversation at the moment. And they've designed sort of a solar vehicle. So they approached us a few years ago based on sort of our history within research institutes and said, listen, this is what we want to do. The problem with solar is it's really heavy, traditional solar. How can we make a lightweight module that looks good and fits onto the vehicle? So we used automotive materials such as ABS to manufacture solar into the fabric of the body panels. So you can't actually see the solar modules are in there, but they're generating energy. So every panel is able to generate energy on the car. So we've got the bonnet, the top of the roof, the car doors everywhere. So that's all been sort of designed, and the results show that we were able to extend the vehicle range by 34 kilometers per day. I mean, the point is the sun's there. Our technology allows us to use it where it hasn't been used before. So why wouldn't we sort of pursue it? So as a result of that, we're working with a number of other automotive companies to develop this solar for sort of the mass market. So to meet the demand, we're currently investing heavily in our company to manufacture in higher volume. In fact, as we speak, we're sort of getting a few walls ripped down and new things put in, so larger equipment and tooling put in. So we manufacture everything at our facility in Blythe in Northumberland. So like I said before, academically we're well known, commercially not so much yet. So that's really why I'm getting here to talk, just to try and sort of raise the awareness for the business. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So just in terms of sort of what we do, I mean, we'll skip this slide quickly, but it's really, we design the complete efficiency, not just cell efficiency. People get hung up with solar technology. People who sort of know a little bit know, all right, this is a certain percentage that you want to get from a solar module. The problem is a lot of people or buy solar modules but not design the full system correct, so you lose a lot of efficiency. What we tend to do is we'll get the solar module, the highest sort of efficiency we can get, and we'll make sure the technology, the electronics are designed correctly, so you maximize the amount of efficiency straight from the solar module into sort of a battery or storage system that you're going to use. If you can go on to the next slide, please. So there's a range of applications that you can use this for. In theory, any surface that has exposure to sunlight should have or could have solar cladded to it in order to generate power. We've since developing this technology with the car organization, and I'll talk you through the technology a bit afterwards. We have seen a huge interest due to sort of its mechanical and sort of, well, mechanical properties. So in industries where they have a large sort of power requirement, such as vertical farming, we're going to be able to clad an entire building, not just the roof of the building. So we're going to be able to maximize the amount of energy that you can generate. So with the ever increasing demand of energy on the grid, we're looking at ways to sort of offset that. Obviously, again, this thing back to the electrical car announcements this morning, where's all the power going to come from to power that? And we're going to need to look at different ways to do that. And wind energy is a great one, but there's no reason that you couldn't clad every outdoor surface in solar to be able to generate energy. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So this is the product that we've got. The product's called Solar Face. It's been patented, everything. So it's a resin encapsulated solar module. We've got sort of traditional solar would have like a backing, and it would be glass on top, which is really heavy. You hear some things are flexible solar. In reality, flexible solar doesn't really exist. It's there's only a certain amount of solar cell can bend before it smashes. This technique's allowing us to sort of have curved modules, not only flat modules. If you go on the next slide, please. So the competitive advantages, so we've got a few things here. So we've developed alongside Technology Research Institute of Spain. It's a quarter of the way to traditional solar, which is key to certain industries. Automotive, very key. Sub-Saharan sort of Africa, transporting the modules to remote sites. Building integrated PV is a key one. There's no need to alter your current infrastructure to sort of strengthen or reinforce the building in order to clad it with solar. A lot of the problems at the minute is if you're going to be putting solar on your roof, you're going to have to strengthen your roof. With the weight of this solar, with the weight of our solar modules, it's going to clad the roof. So in theory, it can be both sort of retrofit onto an existing building, but another option would be new build. So it would actually form the roof. So it's sort of bespoke to fit any building. So it's not limited to the roof. It can be on the sides of the roof. Like I said, we've got a key customer who are in the vertical farming sector. They use an enormous amount of power on a daily basis, and they have huge bills. They've got solar on the building now, but we're going to be designing the solar on the entire building to maximize the amount of energy that they're going to be able to get. And the efficiency is comparable to glass. I think there's things that are out there now, such as thin film solar, which has low weight, but also very low efficiency. There's the Tesla roof tile, which has, it looks like a normal tile, but again, has very low efficiency. This is whatever the highest quality cell is on the market at the time, these solar modules will be able to encapsulate that cell. So it's being able to sort of maximize the energy you can generate with on sort of the entire surface. If you want to go to the next slide. So just sort of traditional solar. So that we've got a couple of sites there. I'll talk through them shortly. But traditional solar may cover sort of 20% of a roof. We're able to cover 100% of the roof. Our sort of theory in designing this was after doing the vehicle, it's like, why build a roof, then add something to it when you can design the roof out of solar, effectively 2 skins rather than just a single one. If you can design the roof covering itself to generate electricity for not a huge increase in cost, we can't see any negatives on doing that. Really what we're saying is we wouldn't need to have the roof tiles and then solar stuck on top of it. The solar would be the roof. And if you already have a program where you'll be going out and doing a re-roofing program, it can be done alongside that. where you've already got the scaffolding up, you can make it cost effective. So no need to generate any more cost or carbon. So proper planning can minimize the carbon costs. If you can go on the next slide, please. So yeah, just a few sort of similarities there. So in terms of sort of the comparison, it's the same amount of time to install a normal roof or solar face. If anything, actually, what the roof that we installed took a bit less time, because you're not having to build the roof then build the solar on top of it. It has all the benefits of a normal roof, with the addition to generating quite a large amount of energy. Like I said before, if you're talking about, rather than generating energy from 20% surface of the roof, you're able to generate energy from the whole roof. The next few slides, I think we can sort of move quite quickly through. I've just got a few pictures there of the installation, the process that we went through on the development site that we have, and then installing the solar module. Yeah, just a view of the finer details. There's a video there of us installing it. I think it's not great quality because the video is so small, and I couldn't really send a larger file over.
Interesting to see, though.
Yeah. And then again, just some of the finer details in terms of sort of the electrical system, how we're going to design it. This product it's designed. We've got sites sort of active now in Belgium and in Spain, and we're going to be, obviously, this vertical farming, and also our facility in Blythe, we're going to be cladding that with this product. But that's all going to be hand laid at the minute. Like I said, we're investing heavily in the company now to automate the manufacturing. So in reality, we're hoping that this product's going to be commercially available and mass manufactured by summer of 2021. And then just the final slide. Yeah, so like I said before, it's been patented, IP, all the tests have been done. Live trials have had positive results. The module performance is doing just as well as standard modules, well, if not better. It's generating more energy. It's a carbon effective solution to manufacture where you're going to use it. I think the key is we manufacture it in the UK, we use it in the UK, we support sort of the UK jobs. It's hitting the targets on the political announcements on the green recovery, which is exactly what we're doing. We're a British company, and we're sort of quite, like I was saying in our group chat before, the solar market's been heavily diluted with but in sort of China. So the cost of solar modules has been driven down massively. So what we've had to do is had to design something different and be able to compete on price. So this technology will tick all of those boxes. So I think that's it really. It's more, it was just to sort of introduce our company, and yeah, just let you know what we're doing. And this is sort of what's happening now. And if anyone wants to get involved with it, just please let us know. We're talking to the local authority, we're talking to Northumberland Council, and we're open to sort of talk to anyone that's interested at the minute.
Thank you, Lewis. That was actually really interesting. So in terms of cost of a new roof, of an ordinary new roof to your product, is it comparable or?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so obviously we need to, that we think it will be. That we'll only be able to sort of finalize that once we've got confirmation from this full automotive process, because there's a few tools that we still need to purchase. But okay. we can't see the materials that we're using. We think it's going to be like for like. So it's like, for us, looking, I mean, we're biased, but it's a no-brainer to be using this product rather than using normal slate or tiles on the top.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, obviously with the decarbonisation and net zero agenda. That's really useful. Are there any questions for Lewis at all? Sorry, Lewis, if you felt a bit rushed there.
No.
Shelley's got one.
I've got one. So obviously, if you're having all your roof covered in the solar, as opposed to, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
If you're having all the roof covered in the solar, you should be able to generate more energy. All the technologies like the inverter and battery storage that you would have in a domestic property large enough, or can they take on the new capacity?
Yes. The full system's been designed, so it would definitely be able to. There's a number of options that we're still talking through, but yes, we've designed the full inverter. It would be all designed by us to allow that. Yeah.
I've got a question here. Is Solar Face accredited to be used with any of the government schemes at the moment, like the Green Homes Grant?
To be honest, we're not sure. So just going back to sort of the point, we've really sort of entered this market coming from a different market sector, coming from sort of automotive, and realizing the potential of this product. So we're launching into this market now.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's going through all the accreditations that we require, like the MCS, the IEC. It's passed all of those tests, but we still need to sort of explore the options that are available when it comes to sort of funding.
Okay. I can't see any more hands up or any questions, so thank you, Lewis. That was really very interesting. Just like to apologise for the bit of a delay that we've had. Just one more slide I wanted to show you, if I can. Here we are. Well, it's a bit more than one actually, but let me just hang on a minute, let me just get rid of. No, I'm not doing very well here, am I?
We could see it though, Diane, so try it again.
Oh, I think that might be it there. Okay, just wanted to raise your awareness of in the recent Public Health Matters briefing or bulletin, there are some slides and some information around the impact of cold weather on health and how COVID-19 amplifies cold-related risks. And it highlights, you know, that cold homes, fuel poverty are a contributor to this, and excess winter deaths. So if you're struggling to get help on board, it might be something you can use for yourself. Just to use, it's worth having a look at the link. I think I had another slide. Yeah. I won't go into that slide because I haven't got much time, but I did want to raise awareness of Fuel Poverty Awareness Day. We're having a virtual Fuel Poverty Awareness Day, and we'd be very grateful if you could support us by various means in terms of Twitter, Facebook, hashtags, on LinkedIn. There's a long list there. Michael Potter can provide you with a digital media pack. It would be really helpful if you could get in touch with your MP or post things that you're doing on Fuel Poverty Day, and we'll try and re-forward them, and that would be really useful. All this information will be on our website. This has been recorded. This session has been recorded, and really just like to say thank you very much to our speakers. That's been absolutely a really good session. Lots of comments about how good the session's been, and just to say thank you very much, and take care. Thank you.